7 years apart, a 19-year-old golden retriever found wandering the streets, a microchip holding the last hope of reunion. When Marcus Bennett received that call from the shelter, he didn't imagine his life was about to change again. Riley had returned, but she carried with her the marks of a painful journey and a secret hidden within her body that almost cost her her life. This is the story of a love that withstood time and distance.
If you enjoy these types of stories, please like and subscribe to the channel to help me bring you more stories like this. Turn on notifications and comment below what you thought. Marcus Bennett had always been passionate about music. On quiet afternoons in Portland, Oregon, he taught piano and guitar to children at a small music school in the city center. The routine was simple, but filled with melodies and smiles. Marcus lived alone in a cozy house, surrounded by cherry trees, where the silence of solitude sometimes weighed heavily on his heart. He needed companionship, something to bring life and joy to that empty space. It was on a sunny spring morning that everything changed. His longtime friend, Claire, convinced him to visit the local animal shelter just to see what it was like. Marcus wasn't planning on adopting anyone that day, but he was curious. As he entered the shelter, the sound of barking and meowing echoed off the walls. Then, in a secluded corner, he saw it. A golden retriever puppy, with bright golden fur and innocent brown eyes, was watching him intently. Its little eyes seemed to be pleading for a chance. Marcus approached slowly, extending his hand. The puppy immediately jumped towards him, licking his face with unrestrained enthusiasm. Something inside Marcus ignited at that instant. He felt that this encounter was not a coincidence, but rather being in the right place at the right time. Without a second thought, he filled out the adoption papers. The puppy now had a name: Riley, inspired by a character from his favorite song about loyalty and friendship. From that moment on, Marcus and Riley became inseparable.
The years that followed were the happiest of Marcus's life. Riley grew into a magnificent golden retriever with a golden coat that shone in the sunlight and a gentle temperament that won over everyone around him. Every morning, Riley waited patiently by the door while Marcus prepared coffee, knowing that they would soon leave for their daily walk in Forest Park. Afternoons were spent at music school, where Riley would lie quietly at Marcus's feet while he taught his students, occasionally lifting his head when a particularly beautiful melody was played. The evenings were reserved just for the two of them. Marcus would play guitar on the porch while Riley rested her head on his lap, her eyes closed in utter contentment. On weekends, they explored trails in the mountains around Portland, with Riley happily running ahead, always returning to make sure Marcus was following. The connection between them was deep and genuine. Riley wasn't just a pet. She was Marcus's best friend, his silent confidant, his reason to smile every day. Marcus cared for Riley with complete dedication. Quality food, regular visits to the veterinarian, daily brushing of her golden coat, and following the shelter's recommendations, he had implanted an identification microchip when Riley was still a puppy. It was a small precaution, a tiny device that held all of Marcus's contact information. He never imagined that this simple decision would become the only hope in a dark future that was approaching. Life seemed perfect, but fate was about to test the strength of that bond in unimaginable ways.
When Riley turned 5, an ordinary summer afternoon turned into Marcus's worst nightmare. It was a hot Saturday in July, and Marcus had decided to take Riley to Forest Park, as they did every weekend. The park was packed with families enjoying the pleasant weather, children running around and other dogs playing freely. Riley was particularly excited that day, running from one side to the other, sniffing bushes and chasing butterflies with his characteristic energy. Marcus watched with a smile, feeling grateful for those simple moments of happiness. Suddenly, without any warning, a deafening sequence of explosions ripped through the air. Someone had decided to set off fireworks in the middle of the afternoon, perhaps celebrating some personal event. The noise was thunderous, each explosion reverberating through the trees like violent thunder. Riley, who had never dealt well with loud noises, panicked instantly. His eyes widened in terror, his ears drooped, and before Marcus could react, Riley ran desperately towards the dense forest surrounding the park. Marcus shouted his name repeatedly, running after him as fast as his legs could carry him. Marcus ran through the forest for hours, shouting Riley's name until his voice was hoarse and aching. He searched every trail, every bush, every possible clearing. As night began to fall and darkness swallowed the forest, Marcus was forced to return home, his heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, staring at the gate, hoping to see Riley's golden silhouette appear running. But only silence and darkness answered his silent prayers.
The following days turned into weeks of frantic searching and growing despair. Marcus put up posters on every lamppost, every store, every street corner in Portland. Riley's smiling photo, tongue sticking out and eyes shining, was everywhere, accompanied by the word "missing" in large red letters. Marcus distributed hundreds of flyers, talked to everyone he met, visited every shelter within an 80-kilometer radius. He called the Portland Animal Shelter daily, obsessively updated the microchip information, and checked online lost animal groups every hour. Weeks turned into months, and months into years. Marcus never completely gave up, but the pain of loss began to settle like a permanent weight on his chest. He continued to leave Riley's water bowl on the porch every night, a small tradition that kept the fragile flame of hope alive. Every time he heard a bark in the street, his heart raced, only to slow down again when he realized it wasn't Riley. The students at the music school noticed the change in Marcus. His music became more melancholic, his smiles rarer. The first anniversary without Riley was devastating. Marcus stared at old photos, remembering the morning walks, the quiet afternoons, and the musical evenings they shared. Well-meaning friends suggested he adopt another dog, saying it would help heal the wound, but Marcus always gently declined. No other dog could replace Riley. He kept her old phone number active, even after moving to a smaller apartment closer to the city center. A small but resilient part of him still believed that one day, somehow, Riley would find her way back home.
7 years had passed since that terrible afternoon in Forest Park. Marcus had learned to live with Riley's absence, though the pain never completely disappeared. He continued teaching music, found small moments of joy in his work, and had even begun to occasionally go out with friends again. But there was always an empty space in his heart, a silence that no melody could fill. The bowl of water still remained on the porch, a ritual he faithfully maintained, though he no longer truly expected Riley to appear. It was a gray March morning when Marcus's phone rang. He was preparing his morning coffee, watching the light rain fall outside the window, when he saw an unfamiliar number on the screen. He almost ignored the call, thinking it was just another sales call, but something made him answer. The voice on the other end was a woman named Sarah, an employee at the Portland Animal Shelter. Her initial words were confused, talking about an elderly dog found in a rural area outside the city. Marcus was about to hang up, politely explaining that she had called the wrong person. Then Sarah said something that made Marcus's world completely stop. They had scanned the dog's microchip. The registered name was Riley, and the contact number was exactly the phone number Marcus had kept active all those years. Marcus felt his legs weaken. He had to lean on the kitchen counter to avoid falling. His hands trembled so much he almost dropped the phone. After 7 long years of silence, empty nights, and abandoned hopes, Riley had been found. Tears began to roll down his face as he tried to process the information. Could it really be possible? Was his Riley alive?
Marcus didn't waste a second. He grabbed his keys and ran to the car, completely ignoring the rain soaking his clothes. His hands trembled so much that he had difficulty putting the key in the ignition. Throughout the drive to the shelter, his heart pounded wildly, thousands of questions flooding his mind. How had Riley survived all these years? Where had he been? Would he even remember Marcus after so long? The distance between his apartment and the shelter had never seemed so long. Each red light was endless torture. Upon arriving at the shelter, Sarah awaited him at reception with a kind but concerned look.
She led him down a silent corridor to a small, quiet room in the back. Before opening the door, she gently took Marcus's arm and prepared him for what he was about to see. Riley was in critical condition, extremely thin, with visible joint problems that hampered his movement, and one of his eyes was almost completely opaque, likely blind due to an untreated infection. Marcus simply nodded, taking a deep breath to control the emotions that threatened to explode. When the door opened, Marcus saw a cage in the corner of the room. Inside, huddled on an old blanket, was an elderly golden retriever who barely resembled the vibrant dog of his memories. His golden coat was dull and patchy, his ribs were visible through his skin, and he looked much smaller than Marcus remembered. For a terrible moment, Marcus doubted if it really was Riley. Then, in a trembling voice, he whispered the name he hadn't uttered in years. The dog's ears twitched slightly, his head lifted with effort, and that good eye fixed on Marcus with instant recognition.
What happened next was something Marcus would never forget for the rest of his life. Riley tried to stand, his hind legs trembling violently from the effort, but the emotion was stronger than his physical weakness. He began to moan, high-pitched, desperate sounds that seemed to carry 7 years of longing, pain, and loneliness. Marcus opened the cage with trembling hands and knelt on the cold floor. Riley crawled to him, pressing his snout against Marcus's chest, inhaling deeply his scent, as if he wanted absolute certainty that this was real and not just another cruel dream. Marcus's tears flowed freely now, wetting Riley's worn fur as he held him tightly, afraid of hurting him because of his evident fragility. Riley cried too, tears streaming from his eyes as he repeatedly licked Marcus's face, his tail wagging weakly in an irregular rhythm. Sarah and other shelter staff watched the scene from a distance, many of them silently wiping away their own tears. That reunion transcended words. It was pure emotion in its most genuine and powerful form. Marcus whispered repeatedly in Riley's ear that everything would be all right now, that he was home, that they would never be separated again. After several long minutes of embracing, the shelter's veterinarian, Dr. Chen, entered the room with a serious but compassionate expression. She explained Riley's condition in detail. Besides severe malnutrition, advanced joint problems, and an eye infection, there were worrying signs that required further examination. Riley was having difficulty breathing. A subtle but constant wheezing accompanied each breath. Dr. Chen strongly recommended that Riley be taken immediately to a specialized veterinary clinic for a complete evaluation. Marcus agreed without hesitation, carefully picked Riley up in his arms, and carried him to the car as if he were the most precious treasure in the world.
At the specialized veterinary clinic, Riley was immediately rushed in for emergency examinations. Marcus waited in the waiting room, unable to stay still, pacing back and forth as he watched the clock on the wall tick away with torturous slowness. After 2 hours that seemed to last an eternity, Dr. Harrison, an experienced veterinarian with gray hair, called Marcus into a private consultation room. His face was serious, and Marcus felt his stomach clench with fear of what he was about to hear. The doctor placed a series of X-ray images on a lighted panel. Dr. Harrison pointed to a dark, irregular shadow on Riley's lungs. It was a benign tumor, but one that had grown silently for years, likely since Riley lived on the streets. The tumor was pressing on Riley's lungs, severely restricting his breathing capacity and causing that constant wheezing Marcus had noticed. If it wasn't removed quickly, Riley wouldn't survive more than a few weeks. The doctor was straightforward and honest about the risks. Riley was 19 years old now, an extremely elderly golden retriever. His body was weakened by years of deprivation and suffering. The surgery was extremely risky, with a mortality rate exceeding 50% for a dog in his condition. Marcus remained silent for a long moment, processing the devastating information. Then he asked the only thing that mattered: what would happen if they didn't operate?
Dr. Harrison lowered his gaze and replied in a soft but clear voice that Riley would die within days, slowly suffocating as the tumor continued to grow. Marcus closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made his decision. Riley had survived 7 years on the streets against all odds, had fought to stay alive, had waited for this reunion. Marcus wouldn't abandon him now. He authorized the surgery immediately, willing to give Riley the chance he deserved, no matter how risky it might be.
Riley's surgery lasted 5 agonizing hours. Marcus remained in the waiting room the entire time, unable to eat or drink anything, his hands clasped in a silent, pleading pose. Each passing minute felt like an hour, every sound from the hallway making his heart race with fear and hope. Finally, Dr. Harrison emerged through the door, still wearing his stained surgical gown. His face was tired, but there was a small smile at the corners of his mouth. The surgery had been a success. The tumor had been completely removed, and although Riley was still in critical condition, his vital signs were stable, and his breathing was finally flowing unobstructed for the first time in years. In the following weeks, Marcus transformed his house into a private hospital for Riley. He meticulously followed all medication protocols, changed dressings with extreme care, and spent hours by Riley's side as he slowly recovered. With each passing day, small improvements appeared. Riley began to eat with more appetite. His eyes regained some of their lost sparkle, and his tail began to wag more forcefully when Marcus entered the room. A month after the surgery, Riley was able to walk to the balcony alone, where he found his old water bowl still in the same place. He drank slowly, looked at Marcus, and made that characteristic sound of contentment that Marcus hadn't heard in 7 years. The following months were filled with a quiet, profound happiness. Riley would never again be the young, energetic dog he once was. His physical limitations were permanent, but he was alive. He was home, and he was with Marcus. They spent afternoons on the porch, Marcus softly playing the guitar, while Riley rested his head in his lap, just as they used to do years ago. Marcus had learned a valuable lesson through this journey. True love knows no limits of time or distance. Riley had waited 7 years to return home, carrying within him a condition that nearly killed him, but his desire to see Marcus again was stronger than any obstacle. In those peaceful afternoons, with Riley breathing calmly beside him, Marcus understood that some bonds are simply unbreakable, and that being in the right place at the right time sometimes means never giving up hope.